7 weeks after the bridge fall, the crew of a Baltimore ship is trapped. Below deck in the big ship's hull, over 24 seamen were still on board the Dali on Monday as a controlled explosion shook the vessel. 7 weeks after its collapse, which left 6 people on the bridge dead and the Dali stranded, the simultaneous blasts drove fragments of Baltimore's once iconic Francis Scott Key Bridge into the murky waters of the Patapsco River in Maryland. The crew and authorities believe that the demolition will signal the start of the end of a protracted procedure that has left the 21 men on board stranded thousands of miles from their homes and isolated and cut off from the outside world. However, it's still uncertain when they'll be allowed to go back home. When the 948-foot, 289-meter container ship Dali struck the Francis Scott Key Bridge during her 27-day voyage from Baltimore to Sri Lanka, hundreds of tons of steel and cement were dumped into the Patapsco. The ship was left trapped beneath a vast area of broken metal. 2 electrical blackouts rendered equipment inoperable prior to the tragedy, according to a preliminary NTSB investigation, which also mentioned that the ship experienced 2 power outages in the 10 hours before the crash. The crew, which consists of 20 Indians and 1 Sri Lankan, has been unable to depart due to visa requirements, a deficiency of necessary shore passes, and concurrent investigations by the FBI and National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB. The crew stayed on board on Monday while authorities cut a section of the bridge that was resting on the ship's bow on purpose, using tiny explosive charges. U.S. Coast Guard Admiral Shannon Gilreath announced that the crew would stay below deck and have a fire team ready before to the controlled demolition. They belong on board the ship. They are essential to maintaining the ship's crew and functions, ADM, Gilreath stated. They're the best responders on board the ship themselves. It is anticipated that the ship will be refloated this week, but it is yet unknown when it will be able to travel the 2 nautical miles, 3.7 kilometers, to port. A depressing circumstance. Joshua Messick, executive director of the Baltimore International Seafarers Center, a nonprofit dedicated to defending the rights of sailors, is one of the people who has communicated with the crew. The group hasn't had much contact with the outside world for a couple of weeks, according to Mr. Messick, because the FBI took their cell phones away as part of the inquiry. They are unable to conduct online banking. Their household bills are unpaid. They are currently extremely alone because they do not have access to any of their data or the contact details of anyone, Mr. Messick stated. They are unable to connect with the people they need to, or even just view their children's images before turning in for the night. It's a truly depressing scenario. The 2 unions that represent sailors, the Singapore Organization of Seamen and the Singapore Maritime Officers Union, were similarly drawn to the sailors' predicament. The unions claimed in a joint statement on May 11th that emotional strain and unfounded fear of personal criminal liability are the main reasons why morale has understandably dipped. Additionally, the statement demanded that the crew's phones be returned swiftly, pointing out that being cut off from family members is causing significant hardship for crew members with young children at home. What fate awaits the 21 sailors that are marooned on the Dali? A Jenga match. However long the investigation takes, the crew's rights and welfare should not be infringed upon, stated Seafarers International Union President Dave Heindel inside the dangerous Baltimore Bridge cleanup. We call on the authorities to be mindful that seafarers utilize mobile devices to conduct personal business for bill payments and, more important, transfer money to their home country to sustain families, he stated. Crew members are becoming demoralized without the basic tools we all take for granted. The BBC was informed by Andrew Middleton, the director of Apostleship of Sea, a program that provides pastoral care to ships passing through Baltimore, that the sailors were in good spirits when he visited them 2 weeks ago, in spite of their ongoing concerns. Once we broke the ice and got everyone to say their name and what part of India they were from, and talk about if they were married or had children, we got the ball rolling, he stated. They were willing to kind of poke fun at one another a little bit. We did our best to get them laughing and joking, hopefully to take their mind off things for even a few minutes. Next actions. According to Mr. Messick, the staff has been issued temporary mobile phones without data plans and SIM cards for the time being. In recent weeks, They have also received care gifts from private individuals and other community groups, which have included handmade quilts and batches of Indian munchies. For clarification on when the sailors could be allowed to leave the ship and finally be repatriated, the BBC has gotten in touch with the Unified Command in charge of the government's response to Dali and the fall of the bridge. The management business of the Dalis, Synergy Marine, based in Singapore, did not reply to multiple inquiries from the BBC. As soon as the ship is manoeuvred out of the shipping channel, Mr. Messick stated he hopes to be allowed to board it to offer emotional support. Subsequently, he thinks that a limited number of sailors, maybe 5 at a time, will be qualified for shore passes, though their movements will be severely restricted. For example, they will probably need to have an escort with them the entire time they are on land. I'm attempting to learn the crew's preferences. If they're going to be bored, I don't want to take them to a baseball game, he declared. So I've reached out to a local cricket club to see if they can organize a match. According to Mr. Messick, some crew members, including the ship's captain, indicated a desire to go somewhere contemplative in nature. We're just trying to help them breathe a bit, he continued. They have been confined on the ship the entire time. They ought to have a tiny bit more of the liberty we take for granted on a daily basis.